Hey friends, this is Dolynny TV. Glad to have you aboard here on a Sunday evening edition in which something just came across my desk that it's kind of been one of the underlying stories of the fall winter so far when it comes to the Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks. Not much animosity in terms of the teams over the course of the past few months following the playoffs back in May. But, I think things still resonate in Vancouver pretty heavy over what happened with the Edmonton Oilers winning in Game 7 in the second round in 2024. Let's take a look at that here in a matter of moments. But before we get there, if you're new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. I promise you, I don't always sound this terrible. Again, as everybody seems to be dealing with colds, flus, strep throat, all that. Welcome to it. I'm not immune. So let's go to this Rick Tocchet quote. Everybody by now has probably heard, especially if you're tuning in from a Vancouver Canucks fan perspective, you heard Rick Tocchet's quote a little while ago about, what was that, a few days back, talking about how 4 or 5 of his players just weren't engaged in the game. Well, this is a follow-up here from today's press conference, basically talking about, well, what he thinks a few days later. Some guys, and this is a quote from the actual interview, sometimes guys aren't going to have their A game. We understand that. Some guys were just not engaged. We don't have the team to have 3 or 4 or 5 passengers. We just don't have it. Edmonton, and again, this is where I'm baffled by this. Edmonton, they can have 4 or 5 guys sleeping. They have guys that can win the game for them. We are a team that needs everybody to play. That was the thing that was most disheartening yesterday, was we had some guys that weren't ready to play. Well, here we go, right? And all of a sudden, Rick Tocchet makes a big, bold claim, and obviously he's done his due diligence and made sure his players are aware of why he's saying what he's saying. Again, I've had an interaction with Rick Tocchet. I truly respect that man. He's done a great job in Vancouver getting that team to where they were at the end of last year, falling short to the Oilers in Game 7. And again, this year's been no terrible start for the Canucks, just not quite what they expected coming out of the gates given what they achieved last year. But it's just funny that, the Oilers were the team that knocked them out in Game 7 last year. And it's Rick Tocchet making a bold claim, taking care of his players for a few hours, and then all of a sudden, the next time he's asked about it, Edmonton is the team that comes up as kind of a look at them, we're not them. And I mean, I'm not sitting here claiming that the Canucks are broken by the Oilers in Game 7 last year. The Canucks just will never be the same because the Oilers broke their hearts or whatever. No, it just is one of those things where I think it's a sign of respect, really, that Rick Tocchet truly believes for his team to be able to stack up against the Edmonton Oilers, they're going to have everyone going, because the Oilers, they can do it with a couple guys missing on the lineup and not fully engaged. And we know at times, game in, game out, the Oilers are guilty. And I think it's a really spot on quote, actually, by Rick Tocchet to say, like, the Oilers are notorious for having some guys that just aren't in the game fully, right? Whether it's Bouchard making some gaffes on the back end, whether it's Stuart Skinner mishandling a puck or whatever, or, fighting the goaltending saves, or fighting, the forwards just overpassing the puck, whatever the case might be. And it's really just one of those things where I found it weird, like, oh, why would that come up? And then the more you look into it, the more you read this quote up. I'll leave it up for a second here. It's just, yeah, it's definitely a huge compliment, number one, to the Edmonton Oilers top guns of Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, what they can do to a team like the Canucks if they don't have a couple guys going, right? So that's where it's definitely interesting to see that the Pacific is now measured almost by the Canucks and the Oilers in terms of what kind of team it takes to beat each other, right? I think you see what happened against Vegas. You see LA is in the mix too, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Oilers play their games against LA here over the next rest of the season, because LA is going to be interesting to see where they finish in the standings. And obviously, if things get mixed up in the playoff bracket this year compared to having the Oilers and Kings in the first round year in, year out for the past 3, I'd be interested to see kind of how things shake out. And I think for the Canucks, they know, right? Like, there's been a certain path that the Edmonton Oilers have gone in the playoffs the past several years. And for them, it's going to be interesting to see, for every team, but specifically the Canucks, if they can kind of figure out, okay, this is what the Oilers are, this is what they can do with X, Y, and Z, and this is simply what it's going to take. And I think for Rick Tocchet having the awareness right now that it's going to take every single player going game in, game out for this team, and that's, I know, a standard ask for a head coach to say, hey, we need all our players going here, but I think it's very true to a T that they need that to be the mentality start to finish this year if they look to try and knock our Edmonton Oilers off of the playoff chart when it comes up to us as an opponent in whatever round that very well might be. Now that said, like I said, it hasn't been the terrible start maybe for the Canucks that it appears to be at times. I mean, Vancouver's just as wild of a hockey market as Edmonton, just as wild as Toronto, right? I think when you come down to it, Montreal's in there as well, and then the other three markets. Calgary, I know things get loud down here sometimes, but I don't think they quite echo across the country near as much, nor does Ottawa, nor does Winnipeg. But you look at it here, Calgary's sitting there tied with Vancouver in points, but on the outs because of games played. And then you have, obviously, Vancouver sitting in the last wildcard spot. But you look at the shakeup inside the Pacific Division here over the past 2 weeks. Edmonton's now inside a top 3 spot. Chasing down number 1 should not be hard with the way the Oilers are playing. Obviously on a 5-game win streak. Florida, just the same as Vegas. Another measuring stick game as the last 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever the heck they have been, seem to have been for the Edmonton Oilers. And now obviously Vegas and all. Things could definitely look very, very different if Vegas or LA go on a 3-game losing streak here to start the week. So we'll see what happens. But this is interesting to see Rick Tocchet throw us into the mix of quite a quote that grabbed eyeballs here over the course of the weekend. And now for the Oilers, right? I think it's an ultimate compliment that, hey, you know what? The Oilers are so good enough based on 2 players that if the Canucks think they want to have a chance, it's going to take everybody to take down the Edmonton Oilers. And that's where, Demko's getting healthy here. You got situations with Lankinen where he's looking like an elite goaltender, but you can flash back to these standings. It's not like the Vancouver Canucks are necessarily running away with it in the goaltending department. I mean, they have, in one less game played, 8 more goals given up than the Edmonton Oilers. You know, the Oilers that have Stuart Skinner, the worst goalie in the NHL. Yeah, that guy. By the way, goals for, the Oilers have played 1 more game, so pretty equal, right? If you're averaging out 4 goals per game for a top flight offense like the Canucks can be, just like the Oilers can be. But, right, the goal differential is a +1 for Vancouver, +13 all of a sudden for the Edmonton Oilers. That seems crazy to be saying that we've gotten to a +13. But friends, I think it's nice to sit back here and see that some other head coach across the NHL in an interview totally unrelated to our Edmonton Oilers game tomorrow, talking about just kind of the Oilers in a sense being a team that doesn't need everybody to beat you, and that's why his team has to be better. That's fantastic to see. And now we look forward to kind of the game on from here as the season really ramps up into Christmas. And then, we get a quiet few weeks and then game on, friends. It's trade deadline time and we see what happens. I'm up on out here. Have yourself a great Sunday evening. We'll catch you later.